Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's Community Wise podcast. I am Holly Long, your host. And today we are going to discuss all things capacity building and what that means in the LISC world, and actually what that means outside of LISC as well. And today we have two special guests with us from our LISC national team, and I'll let them introduce themselves. But first, I want to introduce Tatia Ash and Madeline Fraser Cook. Welcome to this month's podcast, ladies.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Glad to be here.
Yes.
All
Here.
right. So, Madeline, if you don't mind sharing with us kind of your background and how you got to LISC and what you do for LISC.
Sure. I'm Madeline Fraser Cook. I'm Senior Vice President for Community Building and Resilient Solutions here at LISC. And I work with our national teams on a variety of different kinds of projects and programs. The common thing that runs through all of those, and I think really does run through the DNA of LISC, is that we like to focus on capacity building, not only of our internal staff to be good partners, community partners, but also building the capacity of our community partners themselves so that we can ensure that we are here to help you become stronger organizations, more resilient organizations, and enable you to carry out the work of community development into the future. I got to LISC. I have a community organizing background. I started off doing community organizing work in public housing developments. And then from there, I actually shifted gears and went into the nonprofit world, where I started focusing on the intersection of sustainability and community development, and more particularly around green affordable housing and making sure that all of the benefits of sustainability and healthy housing and paying attention to utility efficiencies were flowing through to communities that often aren't represented in the environmental conversation. And that's how I landed at LISC the first time. So I ran a green development program at LISC many years ago. I left, I went to do some work with HUD, and then came back to LISC because I believe so strongly in our mission to provide a helping hand to the community leaders that we serve through our programming. So that's a little bit about me and kind of how I got to LISC, and I'll pass it on to Tasha.
Thank you, Madeline. My name is Tasha Ash. I am a senior program officer for capacity building. I've been at LISC for a short time, really at 9 weeks, but it has been very eventful. I come to LISC from a background in capacity building, actually. Spent the last almost 8 years working with primarily small organizations in rural areas, helping them build their capacity. And that meant whatever, whether it was raising money, connecting them with resources, helping them with their board training, financial management, just so many different things. Prior to that, I've been a labor organizer, similar to Madeline, a community organizer. I worked in every type of nonprofit you can imagine. Most of my life has been in nonprofit sector, from youth development to health programs, economic development programs, but all of it is centering around social justice and how to improve a community. So I'm happy to be here and share my skills and knowledge with LISC and community partners.
Awesome. So let's kick this off. Capacity building. Why is it when you hear the word, it even for an internal LISCer, it almost makes you like cringe because it's like so complex, but yet it's not. How do you explain what capacity building is, and what does that look like? And anyone can go.
So I'll say for me, it looks like whatever you need to do to help a community or community organization improve, fulfill their mission. And that could be a variety of things. It could be as small as connecting them to resources, connecting them to people that could help them with consulting. It ranges. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be intensive. It could really, literally just be coaching. It could be whatever you're doing to help an organization grow and leverage whatever kind of skills and knowledge that they have. I really think of capacity building as a finite job. That means that you're building the capacity enough for this organization so that they won't need you and that they could go on and maybe help someone. So it's not as complicated, and it really is around relationships and building very clear relations. Sometimes that is really the basis of it. It's just that you have a relationship. They trust you, the community organization, so they may be able to hear something from you that they normally would not be able to hear from someone else. If they need to improve their board relations, or and you come in and say that, sometimes if you have that relationship, they're more open to that, knowing that they need to do something. So that's my take on capacity building. Madeline, what's your?
Thanks, Tasha. I mean, very well said. I think I would only add that, there are different strands of capacity building as well. You have capacity building in the service of organizational development, and kind of taking a look, kind of being introspective. If you're sitting in a nonprofit seat, being introspective about, where perhaps some of the gaps are within your organization that you could hope to fill to move you to the next level of, your financial stability or your programming or what have you. But it could also be about building your capacity, your knowledge, your technical expertise around a particular topic, a subject. And I think kind of the big topic at hand these days is resilience and kind of greening, and kind of really thinking about how that integrates into the programming within organizations. So there are various flavors of capacity building, and there are various strands of it. There isn't a particular right track to take with it, but I would kind of underscore the premise that Tasha presented, which is, how do you use capacity building as a means to your end, to your goal, and to achieve the vision that you've set out for, whether it's your program or your organization.
Wow. So, nationally, who are our partners that we typically work with in capacity building, right? And how? And also, Tasha, you and I talked a little bit yesterday in our pre-podcast production about capacity building transcends each area. And Madeline, you touched on this too, each area of LISC and in all the different components of our organization. So if you could give us some examples of who our partners are, and kind of walk us through how do we even initiate those partnerships with these organizations, these outside organizations. What, as a national, I always say LISC has a national backing, when we're talking locally. And I tell people that it helps legitimize what we're doing on a bigger scale, and allows our partners, our peers in Detroit or wherever, to use best practices. So all that to say, can you talk to us a little bit about our national partners who we work with in capacity building, and what are some of what's coming up with capacity building?
Well, that's a big question, Holly, because we have a lot of different partners, and they take a lot of different roles, as I was talking about earlier. But I would put it this way: there are kind of different types of national partners that local offices could tap into and look to. I would start kind of internally. LISC has national programs that are issue-based national programs that provide some technical assistance and capacity building to local offices around very specific topics. the housing team, for example, the national housing team will work with various local offices to build their capacity and their partners' capacity to address affordable housing needs. We've got a community safety and justice program that does a ton of capacity building work as well, not only on the actual programs that feed into kind of the safety and justice context, but also they do quite a bit of organizational development as well to make sure that organizations that are working on community safety programs are well established, strong, sustainable over time. Um, and, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our AmeriCorps program, who works with local offices and really kind of pays attention to the more people side of the capacity building. So, capacity building, yes, is about organizational development topics and program topics, but it's also about having the people power to carry out the work. And so our AmeriCorps program partners with local offices and their community partners to place AmeriCorps members in these organizations so that they could grow the people capacity to do the work. So those are just a couple of examples of kind of our national programs outside of the capacity building national program, of course, that we're a part of. And then if you look externally to LISC, you get to other partners. Like the first one that comes to mind is CHAM. They are the coalition, the Consortium for Housing Asset Management, and they do a ton of trainings for developers of affordable housing around and others around asset management and making sure that folks are aware about the realm of issues that are related to asset management. And then you get to this kind of level around the federal resources that support local organizations and groups around capacity building. And that includes folks like HUD, for example, that has all these capacity building and technical assistance programs, of which we're a part at LISC, and provide help to municipalities, states, counties around some of the technical assistance and capacity building needs.
Why do you think, um, from the common person, why do we think that capacity building or the thought of capacity building can seem so complicated?
Um, to say that I think it feels complicated because it's so broad. As we've been talking about, it could take various strands. It could have lots of different players around the table. Um, it could address some pretty daunting topics. When you're talking about organizational development, you're talking about issues of financial management and systems. You're talking about bylaws. You're talking about policies and procedures, and all of that feels very daunting to wrap your head around. Not to mention that, often organizations that we work with, they have a mission that they're trying to accomplish, and they're trying to provide services to community, and they're really busy, and rightfully so, focused on the work at hand to deliver those services and deliver the housing, the economic development programming, that organization that they were started to work on. And so some of this other stuff that's really critical to their strength and their sustainability over time feels daunting. So that's just kind of some initial thinking around why it might feel complicated. But Tasha, you've been working a lot with local organizations on some of these things.
I think one of the issues too is that sometimes I think people think they have to be all things for all people and that they have to have all the skills rather than actually leveraging what resources. That means that if you're not a financial guru, that you can connect someone to a financial guru. So I think a lot of times we just think we have to be that person if we're a capacity builder, that it is, do I have all those skills? Am I the one that has to provide that expertise And so it feels daunting just from that, but not thinking of you can connect people as long as you have an understanding of what they need. You don't have to be the expert. You can connect them to the expert.
So, how has capacity building changed? And this is more of a Madeline question. Historically at LISC, how has it changed from perhaps when you started in this role versus where we are now in 2024, and then like the future of capacity building? And maybe Tasha, you can speak towards the future and where do we want to go with capacity building at LISC?
So I would say that, capacity building is in LISC's DNA. One of the reasons that this organization was started back in 1979 was to not only provide financial supports and access to resources for organizations, but also to pair that with a capacity building technical assistance support of those organizations. So from the get-go, this idea that we needed an organization to kind of fill in the financing gaps and the resource gaps that existed also was meant to support those organizations and helping them to actually succeed in accessing those resources through capacity building and technical assistance. And then fast forward throughout the decades, we've had various iterations of capacity building programs, programs that were really focused on providing housing organizations, organizational development support. We have had training institutes, organizational development training institutes, ODTI. We've had the LISC Institute, which did a lot of capacity building and providing consulting assistance to our local offices and partners. We developed a capacity mapping tool, which we still use and is extremely effective, and an in-depth analysis of an organization to identify gaps and figure out kind of how to prioritize, how to address those gaps. So we've had a lot of various programs and tools that have been developed over time. And then, we got very focused, I think, on the CAP mapping tool because it's such an effective, holistic, in-depth tool. And so we really were focused a lot on that, and we're hoping to kind of use that as a platform to revive a much more comprehensive capacity building program. And I'll let Tasha talk to this because she's coming in to really help us figure out what that is and how to grow it.
And then for our audience, explain what cat map is, and talk to us a little bit more about that too, because I know LISC is big on acronyms, and I say this all the time on our podcast, and so we have all these acronyms, and you said what it stands for, but sometimes for our regular viewers, just like us, like, okay, whoa, that just went over my head. So Tasha, do you mind explaining?
So actually, I feel like Madeline is probably more equipped for the cat map conversation of what it is. But it is a tool that is a really good tool coming in from the outside to look at that organizations can use and the staff can work. They have to work very closely with list staff has to work very closely with community partners in going through the actual questionnaire and the evaluation. So Madeline may have more information on CatMap, more of the history than I do. I know it was revised in 2021, and there are areas like board development, asset management, financial management is another. There may be more that I am missing, and Madeline can fill in for me. But it is a tool that I see that we need more of CatMap tools as we talk about the future. What I see as someone who's coming in is that what I would think capacity building for the future would be, how do we develop a library for of toolkits that all staff can use and can go to. That is, it might be along with CapMap, it might be another tool that is for a smaller organization where CapMap might not be the best tool in that moment. Um, but also having resources available for staff if they are working with a board, having samples of policies and procedures so that it's not, what I see is that a lot of beauty of LISC is that a lot of colleagues are working together and sharing resources. And so you'll see sometimes I'll see a message where it's like, does anyone have this example of personnel policy that exists, and LIST does have example of that. What I envision is that we have a one-stop shop, and that we also have trainings available for staff that are coming in that may be new to working with community development organizations. That is another place I think that would be good, that we have those kind of standard trainings on all things nonprofit or financial management so that there's a baseline and that we're all in the same place with that. So, and also funds to be able to help, to be able to help local staff with different things, that we have memberships in national organizations, and so that if a local office needs training, that they can connect through membership with, say, the national like Board Source, which is a great organization that provides board training. So that's a little bit of what I see for the future.
Yeah, to add just a little bit more on the capacity map or cap map, it's a diagnostic tool, just to kind of get the conversation going, with between a community organization and LISC, around where their capacity stands, and it's scored. It asks, it's in nine. There are nine different modules. You don't need to go through all nine. You can, maybe pick certain modules that make most sense for your organization, and it really kind of helps start the conversation. And again, it's a starting place in terms of where are the capacity building needs of an organization. Usually, CapMap is really good at organizations that have been around a little bit, maybe are looking to grow to that next level. And so we really rely on cap mapping as one of the tools in the toolkit. I know tools and toolkits are used a lot, but it's one of those things where what's a better way to describe it, I'm not sure, but the idea is that there are guidance documents, templates, to help guide conversations. And then I would add that CapMap isn't for every organization. Sometimes for smaller or nascent organizations, it's not quite the right tool. It may help you think about where you want to be and the questions you want to ask yourself in 2 years, 3 years, or down the road, but it might not be appropriate to gauge where you are as a nascent or newer nonprofit, starting out today. And so that's kind of where Tasha's approach of building a bigger set of resources and having those resources be easily accessible, um, because there are going to be other mechanisms to help the different stages of organizations that we're working with, and answer the various questions that may arise as we LISC work with community partners. And I think the other thing that we want to really start talking about, both with community partners and internally to LISC, is kind of how do we build that relationship, and that goes beyond kind of thinking about grants management and financial management and compliance. How do we build relationships with community partners that are centered in really understanding the work of community partners understanding the work that LISC does, and doing that by virtue of having more in-person kind of regular touch points that make sense for organizations, and LISC, because that's going to be different among the various folks that are in this space.
Wow. I know our time is coming to a close. Any closing thoughts, comments, anything you want our audience to take away with bottom lines about capacity building and how we all work in capacity building, whether you know it or not, if you are working in community development? Any closing thoughts?
So I would just say to stay tuned, because upcoming there will be a couple webinars to look out for, a survey. So we're really going to be ramping up capacity building in the national capacity building in the next couple months. So just stay tuned. Also reach out for, I'm new, so that means that my schedule is not the same as Madeline's and a lot of other folks. So I am available and happy. I mean, this makes me happy to do capacity building and talk about it. So reach out. Anybody can reach out, and I will be happy to help and talk and discuss. And if I'm not the person, then I will connect you as a capacity builder with someone that could help. So, but I really look forward to working with folks around all things capacity building.
And I would say that at essence, for us, capacity building is in service of the organizations that are doing the work on the ground. And we want to make sure that we are mindful of folks' time and staffing capacity, that we are there to extend a hand should organizations need it, that we are mindful that there are financial constraints on nonprofits, that the budgets, organizational budgets, sometimes don't have the flexibility to pay attention to some of these kinds of things. So we're working really hard at LISC to make sure that we're supporting organizations in their kind of more in their capacity building by providing some resources to fund some of this organizational capacity building work, in addition to the program work that has to go along with it. So we respect and acknowledge that there are constraints there, but we're hoping to be good partners and working with organizations to help out on that front. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that LISC is seen as a partner that, yes, provides financing and access to loans and recoverable grants and grants, but we're also seen as a resource to help work through some of the sticky widgets organizationally that pop up, and know that you're not alone as a nonprofit. All nonprofits are in a constant kind of mode of organizational improvement, right? And that's the way all organizations, we're live entities, we're live organisms made up of people and shifting ecosystems out there and in the community development world. And so to the extent that LISC can be a partner in all of the facets of capacity building, and in particular, I think this is important to end with, that capacity building isn't a cookie cutter approach. It's going to be different in different communities and different places. What we bring to the table is, as a national program, is about dissemination of ideas and things that have worked in different places, but that doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily be the best thing for Kansas City LISC. And so we respect the feedback loops and want to make sure that we're customizing the approaches to community needs.
All right, there you have it, this month's Community Wise podcast. We want to thank our guests, Tasha and Madeline. Thank you so much for being here. And if you have any questions, this is to our audience. If you have any questions about capacity building in Kansas City specifically, it looks like we're going to have to do another podcast with our local capacity builder, our expert, we call her, Amanda Wilson, who is our program officer, our senior program officer, who handles housing and capacity building in our community development organizations and things of that nature. So it looks like, Abigail, we're going to have a part 2. So stay tuned for part 2. Take care. Have a good one.